Just a quick announcement. So first, welcome everybody. We'd like to welcome you to the Glacier 2022 reunion. It's been quite a while since many of us seen each other. I think some of us it's over 40 years. I am Tom Berstein. I am one of the many people that helped put this together, along with Bert DeJong, Bill Davis, Bill Kelsey, and Fred. And we're missing one of our people, Master Chief Petty Officer, who's actually, he's supposed to be up here doing these announcements. I think he chickened out. No, it's Master Chief Petty Officer Bill Sherrits. He also helped design the mugs and helped us get those. So please remember him. He's not able to attend this weekend. Tomorrow morning, we've got a busy schedule for the morning. And I'll make this announcement now. We're going to make it also about 9:30 to remind everybody. At 10 o'clock, we need to be down at the station, down the road piece. There's two ways of getting there. You can get together with maybe the person who has a carpool, or you can get together with a group and take an Uber. Or you can fall in out front at what, 9:15, 9:30, you start marching the 2 miles down to the base.
Well, I was looking at it. Is that the over back in the rim? Well, it's the push me. Glacier, and it was like, holy shit. This is one of the original wind claims.
Excuse me. It should be easy to spot.
It wasn't labeled?
No, they had a little label, but it's kind of hidden in it.
Yeah.
Get down to the ship, and we'll get people on board and get all set up for lunch and all of that, and the tours. Are the tours before or after lunch?
Depending on how fast people leave, how people dribble in, they might take a few tours initially.
Okay.
The weather decks, the passageways, CIC, and the bridge.
No, you don't know this.
Probably not. We'll pass
Now, the yeoman's office is the yeoman office.
Thank God for small favors.
What about the snipes? We got a flag officer here. Maybe he can get us into the engine room.
Yeah.
The ensign. Today is only an ensign. So if you can do this to him.
You might get it. All right. Now, the other thing is that this museum has been, I want to say these two gentlemen off to my left here, their life's blood for the last many years. And it is only supported by donations. And so on behalf of of all of you, we, the committee, have put together a check for $500.
Yay.
What a privilege it is to be on board the Star today. We all have many paths that have crossed. Many of us remember when the Star made her first trip to Antarctica. Many of us glaciers were down there helping her. And
Yeah, we did do our job for her.
that's another story. And the Star has reciprocated quite nicely by hosting us today. Signal flags, if you saw the signal flags, they still out Glacier. And a big banner on the side that says, "Welcome home, Glacier." So make sure your command knows how much we appreciate being welcomed and brought on board to spend the afternoon. Thank you very much. Ensign Katnick, where are you? On behalf of the Glacier sailors that were here this weekend, I'd like to thank you very much and ask Vice Admiral Brown to present a check to your morale fund. $250 to the morale fund. So the next item on the agenda will be taking taking tours of the weather decks, some of the passageways, past the boardroom and up to the bridge. So if you're ready for a walk like that, take a tour, go ahead and muster up here. We'll be in groups of about 5 to 10. The duty section will take us forward and up and then aft and down. So if you'd like to take a walk on the decks, come on up and we'll get that portion of the show started. Thank you.
I want to see this. Close enough to them that we're within range of their helicopters, and they can kind of give us updates there as well. It's my understanding. Security cutters, and their bridge is narrow. And on one hand, it's nice for, you know, if you got a ton of break-ins or you got people watching. But when, you know, channel 13's here and channel 16's there and your tug channel's there, it's not very convenient. Yeah, it's like, wait, did I just hear somebody on that radio? But I'll know more about that when I get qualified. Hopefully here. But this kind of does. So you mentioned the Glacier had 10 prime mover engines. So we have, and was that, were they like diesel electric generators or were they?
Yes, diesel electric generators.
Okay. So we have basically that same configuration up forward. So each of our 3 shafts can have 2 diesel engines on it. And that's what we do for most of our operations. And those are diesel electric, but then in addition we have gas turbines that directly go into the shaft. You don't operate both at the same time on the same shaft, but it gives you a lot of flexibility as far as your configurations. So I've read for ice braking, it's nice to do gas turbine number 2 on the centerline shaft, and then the wing shafts have them on the engines, just because the gas turbines just suck through so much fuel so quickly that it's not really effective. You don't need the power.
Way far up on the ice, you can't play.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the one of. I was worried that I don't know how ingrained it was in icebreaker culture, but they asked all the ice pilots have to memorize like the 10 rules of ice braking, and one of those is never use your full power. And basically, it's just that, well, if you get stuck, like it's better to have some in reserve than have it all out than you're.
And I think we had some guys accused for.
That was the discussion. I said double. Talk about weird things. We had a discussion.
Well, you could, for one. I mean,
That's impressive.
He really wanted to be here, but they're going to the National Science Foundation. They kind of got surprised. So he, XO, and Ops are all flying to DC right now to talk to some of the new NSF stakeholders. Basically,
You know, but I like what you said about the captain inviting the E3s, E4s up for have lunch. You know, because inclusion is a, you know,
Absolutely.
you know, gives you ownership. That's smart.
I think this ship's pretty good about making sure that people's voices are heard,
Yeah.
and that their needs are met. I think that's the biggest thing. Because I mean, everybody here in this room can attest that going to deployment is difficult and it's tough on people. And so when you get the opportunity to help your people out or show that you care, like, you have to jump on it. Apparently, last year. There was like at 2 a.m. there was a phone call to the bridge saying like, "Hey, are you guys burning trash right now?" Like, no, we're not burning trash. It was one of the officer staterooms, and they were like, "Oh, well, I smell smoke." And they go in there, and like the cabin had been smoked out, and fortunately E&E was in the room next to them, and he was able to look in the overhead, and he found the short, isolated it, and like took care of it before it spread. And we were like, maybe it's not such a bad thing to not have the overheads, yeah.
So these were just fenestrated metal panels, presumably, right?
Yeah. I'll pitch that idea. I don't know how well hanging plants take to 40-degree rolls, but they work. Like the first collision with an icebreaker, first stowaway, first ODF, things like that.
Yeah, stowaway. I remember some story about that.
Yeah, so there's still a picture of her in the first class petty officer lounge. They kept her. There's like that short stairwell coming up.
And what had happened was this girl was coming to see him, and he was engaged.
Was he wanting nothing
But not to her?
Not to her, no.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and he, she wound up on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
And then we can go over this way. Starbucks.
That's awesome.
So they have little green aprons with their little Polar Starbucks logo.
That's awesome.
And then a good number of our crew have previous experience being baristas before they joined the Coast Guard.
Right.
A couple of like
I see nothing wrong with this.
said, the captain down sauna. The DCs welded it up for us. The EMs wired it in. And then the joke was that there's a CCTV camera there, and if you ever run trouble finding the skipper, you want a stateroom, he wasn't there, you can go to the CCTV feed, and you can see this towel was hanging up there. There's two places where he'd be.
Awesome. She's from Arizona. How's her? I found in Arizona. Is it Arizona? Yeah. Well, where in Arizona, sir?
Born and raised in Winslow.
We have some very, very talented young men who are going to speak to us. And I say young because they are still young at heart, even though they look like the rest of us. So the first speaker this evening, I'm going to ask Fred to come up and introduce him.
So it's my privilege to introduce Captain Joe Hubel. I think most of us have met Captain Joe. Captain Joe's an Academy graduate, 1956, 34 years of service, 6 commands afloat, 95 Cape Nugent as a young man, Agassiz, I may mispronounce that, Unimac, Reliance, the Ingham in Vietnam as an XO, and then the Ingham as a captain, as a CO. The captain of the Northwind, Deep Freeze 77, and then he was the shore command at Group Sioux.
I don't really need this thing anyway. So thank you, Petty Officer Nichols. And I only have 10 minutes, and I can hardly introduce myself in 10 minutes. So thanks to Fred for doing that. It's customary at at a gathering like this to start off always by saying and do Vice Admiral Brown, and then you work your way from there down. But I always like to start at the other end of the rank structure, because we all know that we can't get a ship underway unless the fireman cleans the fuel strainers, unless the seamen are the ones who handle the lines up on the deck. So I am recognizing here, as much as I know you're looking forward to hearing from Admiral Brown, that the very junior people are the people who are tonight Captain Joe's people. So all of you who are firemen and seamen, we couldn't have gotten away, I couldn't have gotten my ships underway without having all of you. The second group of people that I always like to talk about when I get the opportunity to pontificate from either the captain's chair, which is the name of my broadcast that I do every week on the Voice of Vashon, or when I get an opportunity like this, are all of those who remained behind on the dock as we got underway for our long deployments. One of the things that Fred mentioned was that I was both XO in England and Vietnam, and I don't know how many of our Vietnam people are still with us tonight, but we are thinning out rapidly. And so I always take the opportunity not only to recognize them, but to remember that as we got underway from Berkeley Station in Portsmouth, all of you 5th District sailors know about Berkeley Station. And as we got underway and we left on the dock all of our families, and all of those families had to keep the oath and keep the faith while we were deployed. And so the people that I always want to recognize are the ladies who stayed behind, and now, of course, because we're taking women to sea, that they're leaving their husbands behind in some cases. So my heartiest and warmest and most loving thanks to all of you who were left on the dock as we got underway for the places that we had to go. The third group of people, and not third, but people that have been so important in my life, is that I was raised by chief petty officers. And those of you who are chiefs have, if you were fulfilling the conditions imposed on you by the chief's creed, then one of the things that you had the responsibility to do was to raise up young captains. So I had my first command when I was 23. I was the captain of one of the 95 footers out of San Diego. And my first ship, and this is my first glacier connection, my first ship out of the academy was the Winnebago out of Honolulu. And my first XO was Gene McCrory. Now some of you sailed with Captain McCrory, and Dr. Bob over here has written his book about it, and he's got copies of it prominently displayed, Wind, Ice, and Iron. Wind, Fire, and Ice. Jesus Christ, Captain, you need to get yourself sorted out here. So, Wind, Fire, and Ice. And Dr. Bob was the ship's position on that particular deployment, and his captain was Captain Gene McCrory. So McCrory was my first XO. And I learned a great deal from him. One of the things that I learned from him, he was an absolute genius as a single screw ship handler. All of you who are 255 sailors will remember, first of all, that they're single screw, and secondly, that although we're designed to have bridge control, none of them ever worked, at least ours never did. And so the other thing I learned from him was the engine order telegraph. He was also a great shipmate at that time, and I'm not qualified to discuss, but Dr. Bob does at great length in his book. I recommend that you read it. I even recommend that you buy it. You can go and buy it on Amazon.com and buy your own copy. And if you send it to Dr. Bob, he will write in it for you, because he did for me, and I would assume that he would for anybody to whom you send the book to him to write in for you. So that was my first glacier connection, but of course I didn't know it. The chief's mess in that ship, the goat locker in that ship was not particularly the best model that one could have of chief petty officers. I think that's the kindest way that I could put it. But when I then, at the end of that tour, I was assigned as the captain of a 95-footer in San Diego, and I was put under the tender administrations of two of the finest chief petty officers that I knew in the rest of my career afloat and ashore. So one of them was Wallace J. Alexander. Alex was Chief Boatswain's Mate, he was my XO, and the other was Chief Ed Flynn, who was my chief engineer. I was treated with absolutely and complete respect. I was always just the captain. I was never cap or skipper or skip or any of those things. To Alex, I was always the captain. And it was from him that I learned one of the principles that were my guiding principles for my entire command career. You accomplish the mission, you take care of the people that have been given to you, your privilege to command to carry out that mission. Both of those principles are mutually inclusive, both of them have to happen at the same time, and both of them must happen at the same time. And that was the first principle that I learned, especially from Alex. Chief Alexander was almost completely formally uneducated. He could read and he could write and he could do all of those things sufficiently to come into the Coast Guard, but he was not an educated man. But he was a man of incredible integrity, and it was not until much later that I learned the Chief's Creed. And I had to learn the Chief's Creed because somewhat later, when I was captain in Reliance, I was inducted as an honorary chief petty officer at Yorktown. And when I was inducted as an honorary chief petty officer, the chief who was the president of the mess at Yorktown was a Master Chief Bosun mate by the name of Nick Farrell. And Master Chief said, Captain Joe, you don't have to be initiated. This was back in the days when initiation meant something. I mean, it was really, it was hard. And it was messy, and it was dirty. And it was, to some extent, humiliating. So Master Chief said, Captain Joe, you don't have to do that. We're just delighted to have you as an honorary chief. And I said, well, Master Chief, if I'm going to be a chief petty officer, then I have to be initiated. And so I climbed through the ship, just like all of you who are chief petty officers in the Guard before we became so compassionate. And so when Gene McCory was my first XO, that was also my first Pacific winter type room. And I missed by an RCH getting swept overboard in that typhoon. Those of you 255 sailors remember that they had a hedgehog up on the 01 level, and on either side of that hedgehog were two great big ready boxes that were welded onto the steel. And as I was walking up, remember you had to go topside in 255 to get up to the bridge, and I was walking up, and one of those ready boxes cut loose and went right across in front of me and missed me by that RCH right there. If I'd gone over the side, we wouldn't be here together. We would not be talking together. So each one of us here has been a part of that life. Each one of us here has been a part of something much greater than ourselves. And each one of us here, whether we have failed, and I can tell you that your Captain Joe has failed many, many times at both being a good captain, being a good husband, being a good person. We all fail at these things. So, as a shipmate, somebody who puts his mates and his ship before himself, my thought for you is take a look inside. Let's each one of us take a look inside our hearts and our souls and figure out how we can be a better shipmate to those all around us. Have I run out of my 10 minutes? I bet I have.
But he's also one of the people that helped found the Glacier Society? Yes, okay, the Glacier Society. At any rate, He's here, he sailed on deep freeze, and I get this right, 61, 62. Yeah, 59, 61. So, you know, he's got a lot of experience on that. And he can really attest to that, yes, they did fire all those guns, and yes, they did earn an E.
I served in the Navy on the Glacier, and yeah, we fired the guns. I went through Gitmo. And the first day I was there, we hardly got a shell out of the gun. You know, one gun fired, the other didn't fire. It was a mess, and the exec called me down to his cabin. He said, Mr. Gother, tomorrow could be your last day in the Navy.
And Fred, Vice Admiral Mance and Brad.
I've got my bag of tricks. Let's start out with one of my relics from Glacier. I probably could sell this on eBay for a lot of money.
Sell it tonight.
Back when I was on Glacier, this fit. And I miss the days of being a medium. And I really miss the days of having a full head of hair. But it's in that spirit that I'm pleased to join you, and I will donate this because it no longer fits. I love that t-shirt. I didn't wear it much. So first, starting out with the official business. I have a letter here from the Commandant of the United States Coast Guard to the crews of the Glacier. On behalf of the United States Coast Guard workforce, thank you for your service at sea and in the polar regions. During 11 years of Navy service and another 21 with the Coast Guard, Glacier completed 29 missions to the Antarctic and 10 to the Arctic. That remarkable record is a testament to the crews who sailed her and to the families who endured long separations from their loved ones as Glacier protected the nation's polar interests. As an icebreaker sailor myself, I celebrate the unique and challenging experience of polar service. I'm certain some outstanding sea stories, and we've heard a few tonight, will be shared during your time together. Glacier's record is an inspiration to today's icebreaker cruise. Polar Star continues her tradition of excellence on the deep freeze mission, and Healy's transit of the Northwest Passage last summer honored the Go Anywhere tradition of an only of her class icebreaker. As we advance the Polar Security Cutter acquisition, I am excited about the future of the Red Hulk Coast Guard fleet. Again, thank you for your service and for honoring the history and traditions of the Coast Guard icebreaker fleet. Signed, Linda L. Fagan, Admiral, U.S. Coast Guard. How about that? Now, my second mission. My good shipmate and friend, Bert DeYoung, asked me to give you a keynote speech tonight. Now, I've been to enough reunions of veterans to know the last thing you guys want to hear is a keynote from a freaking admiral. Am I right? So I've just compiled a few notes, and quite frankly, like I said, I've got my beverage, and I want to have a little fun with you and share a little tribute with you. So let me I failed you, Bert. I'm not going to do a keynote. But the second thing you asked me to do was to answer the question and tell the story about how I became an admiral. Now, I can take that any number of ways, all the way from tell me your story of how you became an admiral to how the hell did you become an admiral? I know that some of my shipmates in the audience probably are more in the latter category. in any event, I will answer the question. And I expect that some of you may relate to some of the things that I'm going to share very briefly. For context, and my other two classmates are sitting in the back, Pat Lane, Steve Ruda, and I, when we were still at the academy, we were contemplating our first assignment in the fleet. We decided we wanted to go to the largest ship that traveled the furthest. That ship was Glacier. We thought it'd be a great adventure, and surely that it was. You know, as an ensign, I didn't have any real clear career goals. My early intention, and actually most of my classmates, we figured we'd do our 5-year commitment and go make some real money. But my Glacier experience really began to change my thinking about that. I not only found a sense of purpose, you know, why are you here? But I really found a sense of belonging on that ship. And that sense was not like anything that I had experienced in my 4 years at the Coast Guard Academy. In retrospect, to me, Glacier was more than a ship. It was an experience. It really gave me 3 personal ships that served as the foundation for my career success. The first ship is what I'll call craftsmanship. And thanks to professionals like Bruce Little, A.T. Pulaski, Roy Hayes sitting in the back, I developed a love for not only our icebreaker missions, but for my role as an engineer. Glacier taught me how to perfect my craft through dedication and hard work. And that's something that lasted me for my entire 36-year career. The second ship is leadership. You know, from standing watch to serving as DCA, relieving Steve Judson back there, to my daily interactions with the crew. Glacier really made leadership real for me, and I enjoyed the leadership challenge and eventually became a student of leadership. It became my passion. The third ship, and I know all of you can relate to this, and I think Captain Joe spoke about this, is relationships, and I would say even friendships. During our time in Glacier, the ship and the plant were in tough shape. I think it was always in tough shape. But it was the relationships that we all shared that served as that special ingredient that allowed us to be successful with every mission that was given to us, despite a rough condition. And while we respected rank and we respected the chain of command, Bruce Little, our captain, really led the way to demonstrate that it was the close personal bonds that we developed that made the Glacier a truly special experience. You know, think about that, close personal bonds. Joe, you talked about that. Isn't that why we're all here tonight? What do you think?
Yes.
This is the 21st century. You're free to make air toasts. First, I want to commend our reunion planners. Tom, the 3 Doles, Rod, Fred, Dale, and Bert. I want you all to come up here.
Yes.
And reach in that lifting to bring us all together. I think you've re-energized the Glacier Reunion process. And I think success will build from this, and I look forward to supporting you. You did a magnificent job. Propose a toast to the Glacier Reunion Committee. You say, to the Glacier Reunion Committee. So let's try that again. I propose a toast to the Glacier Reunion Committee. To the Glacier Reunion Committee. All right. I propose a toast to the daring polar explorers. To the daring polar explorers. Fourth, given the unique nature of what the Red Fleet does and the White Fleet back in Navy times and for a little bit of the Coast Guard time, it's appropriate for us to remember America's historic icebreakers, such as Staten Island, East Wind, South Wind, Burton Island, West Wind, Edisto, West Wind, I'm not gonna get them all, and we can't forget Mackinac up in the Great Lakes. To the historic icebreakers and their crews. Including the Polar Star, Sea, and the Healy. One of the highlights of my career was actually serving as Commander Coast Guard Pacific area, where I was the fleet commander, not just for the icebreakers, but all of the large cutters in the Pacific. And so I'd like to propose a toast to the modern icebreakers and their crews. Next, and I couldn't have said this just a few short years ago, it's appropriate for us to toast the future polar security cutters, starting with the Polar Sentinel, which is due to be commissioned in 2025. The future polar cutters and their crews. Seventh, and Joe touched on this beautifully, thank you for that. You know, our spouses, our significant others, our families, they're really the winds beneath our wings for everything that we do in active service. We couldn't do it without them. We couldn't continue to serve without them, without their love and support. So I propose a toast to our loved ones. To our loved ones. You know, next, the most traumatic experience I had on Glacier was the 8th of February, 1979, when we lost ET3 Raymond Porter. And I know we've lost a number of icebreaker sailors through the years. Ray was a friend of mine. We played the band together. I was a saxophone player. He was the bass player. He was the leader of the band as an ET3. And I loved him like a brother. He was a friend of mine. And I will always carry his memory with me. As I said, we've all lost shipmates and good friends, whether in service or post-service. I'd like to ask for just a brief moment of silence for those who have crossed the bar. And I'd like to propose a toast to our friends and shipmates who have crossed the bar. And finally, I want to thank all of you for expending your time, talent, and treasure for joining us for what I think is a reunion for the ages. I've really had a good time. Truth be told, Glacier was the only ship I ever served on. It's odd that I would become a fleet commander. But as I said before, it was a foundational experience that really set the track line for the rest of my career. And I really, truly treasure that. One of the many passions that I have is the love of jazz. 30 years ago, jazz great Shirley Horn recorded a song called Here's to Life. Some of you may know it. Now, I'm not going to sing it. But as we prepare to depart each other's company, let me share the ending lines of that song that always spoke to me. So here's to life, and every day it brings. Here's to life, to dreamers and their dreams. May all your storms be weathered, and all that's good get better. Here's to life, here's to love, and here's to you. Glacier family, my last toast, here's to you. Here's to you. 990021.
You have it already. You have it already.
They'll have it already.
Put that one back in the pot.
So we'll take it.
990038.
Oh, that's me.
There you go.
Oh, absolutely.
Congratulations.
All right, we'll do another one. Number 48. Wow. Steve Rudolph. Well, at any rate, as we settle down here for the
time. Want you to stay and continue sharing our sea stories. There's a few people that have walked around, but for the civilians, the spouses that is, you probably know the difference between a sea story and a fairy tale, right? The fairy tale begins once upon a time. You can't say what the sea story begins with, but I think you'll know. All right. Anyway, so enjoy, continue to have fun, have some more drinks and talk. We've got the room till 10 o'clock this evening.
Group photos at some point.
Actually, that's what, in that time, we're also going to be calling you for group photos. So all the, it's right here. So we are all set. So as we begin, listen loudly, all those who were on the glacier in the 60s, if you could step over to that corner, they'll form you up and they'll take your picture, and in a few minutes I'll call those in the 70s, and those in the 80s.